to our ADPs to avoid. You can call these busts, you call them whatever you want. We call them ADPs to avoid. We don't necessarily hate the player, we just hate where they're being drafted. Beebs, will stick with you. You've got the lowest ADP of the group.
Yeah, I didn't want to do this because I didn't want to see Brock cry, especially not on camera, but I think he would hopefully agree with me. Moritz Seider is the ADP I'm avoiding. Right now, Seider's currently going at 67 ADP. That is just way, way, way too sweet for someone who, yes, they may fill the hit categories, but they just don't quite do it across the board like I'd like for someone going prior to the 70th pick overall. As I mentioned, his value is clearly attached to his 212 hits that he had last season. That placed him 23rd in the NHL, so he's a standout in banger leagues. He's proven year after year he can get above the 200 hit threshold, but he hasn't gone much higher than that. So it seems like his ceiling might be mid 200s. With that said, fantastic, but there were 30 players to go above 200 plus hits last season and 50 players to go above 175, which is just 40 hits away from what Seider was providing. That just shows that maybe his elite hit totals that he was providing aren't quite worth it if you are in a banger league. Now, if we go and look at his other numbers, Seider needed to average 25.04 last season just to put up a pretty measly. Sorry, I might need an edit here. I thought I had some numbers and they're not there.
He had 8 goals, 38 assists, 46 points.
Yeah. So come back in 1 second. Just to put up a pretty measly 8 goals, 38 points, or 38 assists and 46 points, which realistically did not place him too high across the board in non-banger leagues. We are 4 seasons into Seider's career. He's been fantastic for Detroit, but that doesn't always translate to fantasy success. He's never once surpassed 10 goals. We talked about earlier how many people are doing that nowadays. There was 25 players who did it last year. He's never once surpassed 51 or 50 points. There were 15 of those last year, and he's never had more than 187 shots on goal while averaging below 150 in his last 3 seasons. So Seider just really doesn't fill the category to justify the sweetness of this pick. Yes, if your league has blocks, we can maybe push him a little bit higher because he does provide some value there. But where I also worry about Seider is a lot of his points last year, actually more than half came on the power play. He had 24 power play points while only having 46 total. He's currently locked in the top power play spot in Detroit, but Erik Gustafsson is realistically probably only in the lineup to take that spot. I don't see him out there other than a power play specialist. So that holds some worry for Seider, as he's never really been a goal scorer in that position, never had more than 4 power play goals in a season. I think at this spot, it's just a little too sweet with some of the names around him being taken. Even if you are in a banger league, there are other ways to make up for hits. And I would rather look for a Kiefer Sherwood at the end of my draft. Look for someone who can provide close to 300 hits with my final pick if I am in a banger league and not reach at this point. Plus, if you are in banger leagues, defense kind of stretch out a little bit longer too. So 67, too high for a guy who has never gotten more than 50 points in a season. So I love his game. I love what he does, but I don't love his fantasy values. So sorry, Moritz Seider, you will not be drafted by Beebs this year.
Yeah, I think his ADP is obviously more driven by those other leagues, those, Yahoo standard leagues. The points leagues include blocks. The category leagues include hits. So he's kind of like a poor man's Mackenzie Weegar, right? In a way, in terms of fantasy. So
still being drafted
leagues,
as a rich man's 67 is not poor. That's kind of where it's
at. His ADP though is, I think, a little bit driven by those leagues. But yeah, so he's another one of those players, I guess what I'm saying is like Weegar, Kachuk, where it's like use the DFO customizable rankings tool, and in standard formats where he's just like points leagues, not going to be drafted anywhere close to there. Other leagues has a little bit more value. D, let's get to you. Your ADP to avoid out in Montreal.
Yeah, it's going to be Noah Dobson, ADP of 80.9 right now, a DFO consensus rank of 139, so 5 full rounds back for us in terms of where he's being drafted. This one hurts. We've been high on Dobson for years in this podcast, but given the change of scenery to Montreal, I just can't justify being anywhere close to that ADP right now. Dobson's biggest weapon in fantasy hockey is his shot volume. I don't really expect that to take too much of a hit this season, given the amount of minutes that I expect him to absorb at 5v5, but we already saw what happened last season when he lost power play time and finished with just 29 assists. Lane Hudson showed last year the value that he can provide on the main advantage. and he will rightfully hold down that spot on the top unit coming into the season, which to me means barring an injury to Hudson, Dobson's really only shot at getting time on that top power play unit is if the Canadians opt to play both blue liners there. So we talk about all the time how difficult it is for a defenseman to be fantasy relevant without substantial power play time. To me, there's just simply way too much uncertainty around that power play usage with Dobson to justify burning a top 80 pick on him. I just think there's much safer bets you can make at the position in later rounds. And he's going at a spot in the draft where there are plenty of forwards and goaltenders going that I'd rather add to my team. I still love what he brings to this Habs blue line. Defensive play has improved mightily in the last couple of seasons. The Islanders averaged just 2.29 expected goals against per 60 with Dobson on the ice at 5v5 last year, which again is why I think the Habs will be happy to hand him all the difficult matchups and heavy minutes that he can handle at even strength, allow him to take a backseat to Hudson on the power play, and I think his raw production will suffer as a result. So I'm happy to let one of my league mates take the bait here in this preseason.
I don't have many thoughts on Dobson. I think you absolutely nailed it. Just curious on both of your thoughts here on Lane Hudson. We didn't really talk about him a lot just because he did fall just outside of our top 10 at number 11. ADP 49. He's going as the number 8 defenseman off the board. And obviously what he did in his rookie year was sensational. Especially, we kind of talked about it earlier this season. He was my breakout last year despite being a rookie. And it just was like, hey, we just need a little bit of time for him to supplant Mike Matheson on PB1. Once that happened, he took off, right? After the first basically 20 games of the season, he finished on a 74-point pace, which is really, really good, but was also on pace for just 97 shots on goal. So this profile feels extremely similar to like what we saw from Quinn Hughes early in his career, right? Like, so it's how early do you take Lane Hudson? Are you guys, obviously we're under ADP here. Is he just a player? D, we'll start with you obviously as somebody who has Dobson as an ADP to avoid. You obviously believe in Hudson, but is that ADP also a little too rich for you?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be in on either of them this preseason. I could certainly see the shot volume climbing, right? Like he's such a good skater. He gets into such great positions and maybe he doesn't look off of those as much to, look to create for his teammates as he did last season. But I just can't justify burning a pick that early on a guy who finished with 91 shots last season. I also think the assist production, it's going to be a little tricky to replicate. Still think he's a tremendous playmaker and skater, like I said, that's going to allow him to create a lot of dangerous opportunities for his team, but finished third in the league last year with 35 secondary assists compared to just 25 primary assists, 31 primary points as a whole. Generally, really hard to replicate year over year and a sign of potential regression there. So, yeah, he's at the point where he can still get better. Like I say, maybe find ways to get more pucks on net. But I think a good season for Hudson from a fantasy perspective would be kind of replicating what he did last year. And just a little bit too much of a one-trick pony in terms of where he's going in fantasy circles. So not even to mention that, you're getting no supplemental coverage in extended category leagues from the shots with hits or anything else.
No,
Beebs, what do you think?
I completely agree. I think people are almost drafting him for his ceiling, thinking that they're going to get that next level Hudson. But what's a little scary is Noah Dobson hasn't averaged under 23 minutes in the last 2 years. So basically that's 23 minutes that has to enter that lineup. Whether he's on the opposite hand or not from Hudson, it still is 23 minutes being entered into a defensive spot where there's only 6 spots to be held. Hudson last year had 22 or averaged 22.44, and I think he'll probably stay about there. You guys mentioned it. I've kind of been tooting the whole 200 shots thing. D said 91 shots last year. That's egregious. If you're for him to take that next step forward and even justify this spot, I'm going to need to see even 150 across a full season, and I'm still going to be asking for more. So there is a lot of room to grow, and I think bringing in a guy who's known for his offensive talent is probably the worst thing that could have happened here for Hudson. The other thing is, let's say Montreal power play starts off a little cold with Lane Hudson in that spot. If they decide to go to Noah Dobson, who had 24 and 22 power play points just a few seasons ago, then Hudson goes back to what we were afraid of last year behind Matheson, and his value or his ADP gets a little more worrisome. So I think there's just safer picks right there.
Speaking of safer picks, my ADP to avoid is Jacob Chikrin. I just think that, obviously a guy that was on that top power play unit at times last year. Obviously, John Carlson's still there. But really, really good goal scorer, 14 goals and 20 goals in each of the last 2 seasons. Obviously, really, really strong. Shot 11% last year. Not going to replicate that, even though he is a 7.4% shooter, which is pretty good from a defenseman. Definitely a good goal scorer. Never really put up really strong assist totals. I think there's a lot of competition for that time on ice in Washington as well. I don't mind the player. I don't think that this is a very good ADP, which I think I forgot to mention is currently 68.3. And oddly enough, I actually have Chychrun, I think, ranked the highest of any of the 5 DFO analysts, and still I'm not even getting to this ADP. So I think a full year on that top power play unit, like if that ends up being the case, I think he can return pretty good value. I just don't really see him being a guy that's like, yep, an absolute home run at this pick, especially when you start to get into that round. Like you're looking at right after him, Sebastian Aho, Elias Pettersson, Seth Jarvis, Alex DeBrincat, Thomas Harley. The list goes on and on of really quality players. Mishkov, Larkin, like there's a lot of Luke Strayman all going right around him of players that I'm just definitely going to take over him and probably wait a little bit later on defensemen. So Jacob Chychrun, ADP to avoid for me. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.